this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Friday. Kick off the Winter Olympics in style with the opening ceremony from Italy, featuring a special performance by Mariah Carey. Celebrate the greatest athletes from around the globe as they come together to go for gold.
Lindsey Vonn, sensational!
The opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics.
Ilya Malinin. Redefining the sport.
Friday at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Morgan. We're learning more every day about the brutal homicide of Brian Thompson, CEO of United Healthcare. This is part 2 of our coverage of that case. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. There's an old adage that says it's a poor workman that curses his tools. In this particular case, whoever it is that is responsible for the death of Brian Thompson, and allegedly, according to the authorities, they're looking at Mr. Mangione. He showed up with the right hardware for the job, apparently, Dave.
I had so many questions about the gun, the bullets. So let's start there, Joe. You explained the ghost gun and how that was possibly done in a 3D printer. We'll find out more about the 3D print gun that they call the ghost gun. But you're talking about the Glock and being 9mm. And I know that there was a 9mm unfired shell bullet, right? As well as they had 3 shells that were found at the scene that had writing on them that actually means something in all of this. But more than all of that, and there was the mention of a hollow point bullet.
Right.
And for those of us who only hear about these things on, movies and in TV, what are we talking about with a 9mm round, first of all, and then adding into it that it's a hollow point?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think a lot of people are, a bit, they can be a bit confused. But the main purpose of a so-called hollow point round is expansion. And so, let's think about this: when the firing sequence of a handgun, let's just take a Glock. It's got an internal firing pin. An internal hammer. It strikes the firing pin when the trigger is actuated. That firing pin goes forward. It strikes the primer cap, which is this little circle at the base of a live round, and it showers out heated or burning primer. Okay, it's got a very specific chemical structure to it. Well, that little flame that comes off of that primer cap travels up through what are called flash holes in the live round, and there's these tiny little holes, and it throws it through those little flash holes. There's a bunch of these little sparks that are given off, and as it goes through the flash holes, it hits what's referred to as the propellant inside of the live round, Dave. And when that propellant is ignited, it pushes the projectile down the barrel. And you hear about us talking about rifling in a barrel. Rifling are those grooves that are created in a barrel, and it makes the now projectile. It's no longer an intact piece of ammo. People use the term bullet, and a bullet for a lot of people will say it means like an entire projectile, live round. For most people, I think that projectile should be used here because it is what is being projected. So you've got the casing that is essentially ejected out of the side, and this projectile is sent out of the muzzle. Well, because of the rifling, the projectile is spinning. And what does spinning do? Well, the spinning actually maintains the energy. You don't have energy depletion like you do, say, with like a smoothbore, like a shotgun, where you're just blasting this thing out. And after a few yards, shotgun rounds in particular, they spread and then they lose their energy really quickly. They just kind of fall. It's aerodynamically inefficient. Okay. But with a rifled round, and we learned this all the way back, in the Civil War. That's why the wounds were so devastating. You have rifled weapons, and it maintains the energy. Now, to add on to this, years ago, we'd gone through a whole series of different types of ammo over the years. There were things like wad cutters that were famous back in the 70s that people would fire in their .357 revolvers. But then a new type of round hit the market, and it's called a hollow point. And so you've got this kind of cupped out area in the center. So if you think about the shape of a projectile, it looks like a nose cone on a rocket. Okay. Well, their hollow points are not shaped like that. It's the guts of that center portion are hollowed out, if you will. And so it forms this kind of cup. Well, what does that mean? Well, as that projectile exits that barrel, it's spinning. And when it hits the target, what these projectiles are designed to do is that when it impacts the target, let's say the back of a human being, okay, that projectile goes from being a 9mm round, okay, which if you think about it, it's, probably 0.35 inches in diameter. It goes from being 0.35 inches in diameter to what the manufacturer is hoping it does is that it expands. And so it goes from a 9mm to a 15mm. Do you see? I mean, that's the purpose of it. So as it blossoms out, the hollow point, as it blossoms out, it begins to drag and cavitate through the body. Okay. And it's very basic because the idea is as it is increasing the caliber size. All right. Not all of them expand. I've seen them where they don't expand a number of times. All right. So it's not guaranteed every single time. For the most part, they do, or at least partially. The more this thing expands, the more tissue you're going to tear up. Okay. And there's been a number of these specialized hollow points have been made. I think the Black Talon was created a few years ago, and it actually has, like, when it expands, it's got little teeth on it, on the edge of it, like little hooks. And so as it goes through the body, any of the little micro vessels that are in there, it grabs them and it just kind of rips them and shreds them, not to mention all of the other tissue. And it finally comes to rest. And many times when you have a hollow point, if it does its job where it expands, you'll get these events depending upon the thickness of that portion of the body that's going through. Sometimes you won't have them exit. They'll just be rattling around, in the body. And then you'll recover them at autopsy. And so you've got this round that otherwise, let's say if it went through and it's at 0.35 inches in diameter with a standard projectile, let's say it's not hollow point, you've got some of it a better chance of perhaps surviving as opposed to a hollow point that's now expanded out to 15mm as opposed to 9mm. And it's created this huge cavitation in the body where it's ripped all the tissue to shreds. So he showed up with this in tow. This is apparently the type of ammo, at least at this point. We know that at least one of the rounds that he found. I don't know because we hadn't gotten a lot of, and look, kudos to Allatoona police that hooked this guy up, Dave, because they didn't really release a lot of information. All they said is they recovered a weapon, okay, or a ghost gun, I think, or something to that effect. So we don't know if the weapon was loaded. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. We don't know how many of these rounds he had. I'm still flummoxed over the fact that he had this thing.
Right.
First off, you realize how much water there is in between New York and Allatoona, Pennsylvania?
Friday. Kick off the Winter Olympics in style with the opening ceremony from Italy, featuring a special performance by Mariah Carey. Celebrate the greatest athletes from around the globe as they come together to go for gold.
Lindsey Vonn, sensational!
The opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics.
Ilya Malinin.
Redefining the sport.
Friday at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
He had taken the bus into town back in November. And you know what the beauty of the traveling with a bus with a gun is? You're not going to go through a metal detector.
I want to go back to him shooting Brian Thompson. He's using the 9mm bullet and a 9mm round. And on it, he has inscribed, he's written words on these shells. Now, I don't know how the gun loads. It's not a revolver. I mean, it's not going to have the spinning wheel, right? It's going to have a cartridge load.
Yeah, it's a magazine.
Okay, so he's loading that magazine with these, and he's written on at least 3 of them the words delay, deny, and the third word,
depose.
Depose. Thank you.
Yeah,
and that's all part of a book about the insurance agencies ripping us all off when it comes to getting our care taken care of with health.
Yeah,
but he had written that on these. The killer had written it on those shells that were found at the scene, the shell casings.
Yeah, he did. And again, that's, our friends in question document examination, they don't get the love in forensics that they should.
Right.
I've got friends that are question document examiners, or they're either called QDEs or FDEs, depending upon kind of what school they come from, forensic document examiners and question document examiners. I love these people. I really do. They're fascinating to talk to, and their training is insane. Problem is that not as many people are writing anymore. So, but I can guarantee you that there will be these individual skills who are going to be engaged in this case.
Because even though they have a fingerprint match on the shells and everything else, they will still break down who wrote that to make sure there's not somebody else involved. In his manifesto, he claimed that he did this by himself, that nobody else was involved. Right. But somebody... And
again, that was written, my understanding, you got a couple of... I'm glad you brought that up, Dave, because the manifesto, this notebook that he's got that's rather verbose, I think it's a couple of 100 pages maybe, is handwritten.
Right.
My understanding is it's in a notebook, a spiral notebook.
Okay. In the spiral notebook, he had a to-do list, and he had a few other things in this spiral notebook, but he makes a comment in the so-called manifesto that the spiral notebook may or may not be there. So he wasn't, when he wrote the manifesto, it was separate from his notebook, the spiral notebook. The manifesto is 262 handwritten words allegedly written by Luigi Mangione. Now they will use that. They'll get his fingerprints off all this paper anyway, but then they have found his fingerprints on the 9mm shells with the handwriting on them at the scene. They also, by the way, got his fingerprint match on the water bottle from the Starbucks, the Kind bar.
Yeah, the protein bar. Yeah.
Yeah. And there was also a cell phone. There was a burner phone found nearby that had his fingerprints.
Yeah, and so there's nothing. And here's another thing. If I remember, please correct me if I'm wrong.
You're wrong.
Thank you. Don't believe anything I say. If I remember correctly, I'm thinking that there was a freeze frame of him on CCTV. He's not wearing gloves.
Right.
He's not wearing gloves.
So, he's got a mask over his face, the blue medical mask on his face.
Yeah.
That we do see him dump down one time when he's, with the girl at the hospital when she says, let me see that pretty smile. And he dumps it down. And, but other than that, he kept it pretty buttoned up. But no, I didn't see any gloves on him. And we know we got fingerprints on the shells.
How can you do this much? And this is what we talk about this all the time, don't we? You and I need to write a book. We talk about this all the time where we there's that one thing that people do, and there's not just one in this case, there's multiple. But going back to the handwriting, so our friends understand when a case of question document comes up, what will happen is, and this has happened for years and years, particularly when you think, and by the way, I urge anybody listening to this to explore the life of Dr. or Professor Osborne, who wrote the seminal text on handwriting examination. He actually testified, and we're going to cover this case. I think you and I have talked about it, of the Lindbergh kidnapping.
Oh,
and
my goodness.
Professor Osborne wrote the definitive text on handwriting. By the way, if you can get your hands on an original copy, you're going to be wealthy, because it's still a text that's used. And this thing was written back in the 20s or 30s, I think.
Wow.
Anyway, that the same principles still apply today.
Mm-hmm.
But at any rate, what they're going to do is, for instance, they will have him either offer up what are referred to as exemplars. So they will give him a sheet of paper, and it can either be ruled or non-ruled, and they're going to give him an instrument that approximates whatever it is that he was using, whether it's a Sharpie or my personal favorite, maybe they'll give us an endorsement, Pilot extra fine point, which I've always written with. I wrote all my
as an
reports.
academic, I thought you were going to say the number 2 lead pencil.
Hardly. I'm too lazy. They're going to try to approximate whatever it is. I mean, it could be a disposable Bic.
Right.
I guess they still make disposable Bic pens. And they're going to get the instrument that approximates what the handwriting examiner believes this thing was generated in, and they're going to say, write these words.
Okay.
And they're going to have him write the words out. Okay.
Even if he says, look, you got my manifesto, you got my spiral notebook. What more do you want? Those are my right. I wrote it. Do they still make him write it down so that they can verify that he could be covering for somebody?
And say, do what I tell you to do.
Okay.
Or we'll get a subpoena for it.
Oh,
and,
okay.
And they'll compel him to do it. It's like
Wow.
going in. I don't know if it's actually, this might be a Nancy question, but it's like when they hooked him up in Altoona, they printed him. Okay.
Right.
Well, they've got that print, even if he's not in NCIC, the National Crime Information Center database. They now have his print locked in. Okay, it's been officially taken. Well, they can take that print, and that's going to go to the print section at the crime lab.
Okay.
And when they either use super glue or dusting or whatever it is they use to lift these prints off these items, the water bottle and the rounds in particular, which are not fun to do. That's kind of a hard thing to do sometimes. They're very skilled at it. Or that plastic wrapper, they'll take those latent prints, and latent means unseen, and they'll lift them. They'll have and then they've got this static collection of his print from Altoona, and they will have printed him again when he in New York as well.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to be printed multiple times. Okay. Even at the conclusion of a trial, and I'm not saying he's going to be found guilty. I'm just saying, I'll just say in a in a broad sense, anybody that's hooked up on charges, they're tried and convicted. One of the first things they do is lead you out of the courtroom, and they take you and they print you again.
Wow.
Yeah. And so he's going to be printed. And so they'll have that information too, but they will compare his handwriting. And we all have tendencies. Do you know, Dave, that years ago, a lot of these people that do prints, that do handwriting examinations, they felt as though that they could regionalize your handwriting. Like they could get an idea as to where you learned to write or who taught you how to write based upon, like if it was your parent or whether it was your teacher that's like, in my day, slapping the back of your hand with a ruler, which did happen when you're forming your letters. There's a couple of old texts. You've got the Palmer text and I'm going to pronounce this wrong, the Zahner Blauser. Matter of fact, famously and forgive me if I've mentioned this before, I love this movie, Driving Miss Daisy.
Yeah.
Miss Daisy gives Hoke a present, and she said, that's a Zahner writer. And when she says that, that's something that handwriting examiners actually go back to, because it's like those formed letters that you saw in cursive where you learn how to write out of these things. Well, there's certain ways that you learn how to write, and these people can look at your writing even as an adult, and if they can take your 6-year-old handwriting, do you know that they can actually find similarities?
Wow.
Yeah, your handwriting
crazy.
evolves, but there are just certain things that they look for. It's really hard to escape. It really is. But I'm sorry, I feel like I'm having a lecture.
We will be
revisiting
this. We will revisit this on our JonBenet Ramsey episode coming up.
Yeah, we will.
Yeah.
We will, because there's a lot in there.
So they will be using, over the course of the next several weeks and months, they will be breaking down each aspect of the evidence that they've announced already. And
there's going to be DNA too. I think there's going to be a DNA. I don't know what purpose it'll necessarily serve, but I guess as a confirmatory test, and I think that they said they were running DNA. Mm-hmm. So you're going to get that off of the, and let's just say, like, for instance, that kind bar that you mentioned. Mm-hmm. Let's see. I know because of something you just told me. You're a big fan of Reese's Cups, aren't you?
Oh, yeah.
I dig them too. So most of the time when if you eat a Reese's Cup, okay, when you actually have it in the cup, the little paper cup,
right? Do
you take it completely out of the cup, or do you peel the cup back and then take a bite of it and then roll it back up in the cup, or do you just completely extricate it from that?
You actually take it out of the wrapper. I've never been able to wait that long. I suck the whole thing down. I eat that brown wrapper, man. Can't catch me.
However, think about a candy bar.
Yeah, you peel it off. Yeah, but you do. You peel it out.
Peel it like a banana. Well,
right.
Guess what you do if you're peeling it like a banana? Well, you can actually leave spittle on the interior of that wrapper. And again, that's a sourcing area for DNA.
When you were telling me about the Reese's Peanut Butter Cup right then, all I was thinking of, the most frustrating thing of eating those is when you do peel it off there, the little cup it's sitting in, and you realize there's some chocolate that's stuck in the bottom.
What's the deal with that?
I feel like I'm such a child. I'm going to lick that if nobody's looking,
I'm not telling nobody, man. If you do it, Godspeed, go with you.
I don't plan on committing any murders, so there you go. But
I mean, they're going to look. Yep. They're going to look for DNA, and again, that goes to this. It's going to be
so funny.
As careful as this individual, alleged perpetrator, has apparently been, from what we've been told, what we've seen. It's the devil again is in the details. Those little things that you leave behind that you just didn't count on for whatever reason. And I'm still not completely convinced that maybe some people want to be caught.
Friday. Kick off the Winter Olympics in style with the opening ceremony from Italy, featuring a special performance by Mariah Carey. Celebrate the greatest athletes from around the globe as they come together to go for gold.
Lindsey Vonn, sensational!
The opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics.
Redefining the sport.
Friday at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
That manifesto, Dave, I got to tell you, man, it is going to be picked down to the bone from all types of behaviorists that are out there. I'm sure that the people that do psychological profiling are salivating over this thing to see what kind of nuggets, that they can kind of conjure up out of this thing to develop, some type of understanding. Because one of the biggest things about this case, and something that you had said from the top of the show that I did not read until today that was quite amazing to me, is the fact that he was not a customer of United Healthcare. And I'm thinking, what's your beef at this point in time? What's your beef? Did you suddenly manifest this beef as you're luxuriating on the beautiful sand beaches in Hawaii?
Joe, when you say, where's the beef? That's actually been bottom line for all of law enforcement. What was the point? Why did he pick Brian Thompson, and why did he pick it at that time? Actually, the timing may be oddly pointed out that he, in his spiral notebook, he talks about how he procrastinated. So this has been something he'd been planning for some time, long enough that he could have procrastinated and learned more. To the federal criminal complaint that has been unsealed now, he's charged with murder through the use of a firearm, 2 stalking charges and firearms offense, and he actually can now face the death penalty if he's found guilty of the federal murder charges. The state charges carry a maximum penalty of life in prison without the possibility of parole. Prosecutors have not indicated whether they're going to seek the death penalty. That decision would ultimately need to be approved by the U.S. Attorney General. Of course, he faces charges in Pennsylvania due to the 3D printed firearm, false IDs he had, and the state and federal trials are going to work in parallel, according to the Manhattan DA's office, and the state trial will come before his federal trial. So that kind of lays out what we're looking at. The push for the federal charges came from the U.S. Attorney's Office. Multiple law enforcement sources have confirmed this already because the FBI was already involved in the investigation, assisting the NYPD with out-of-town leads. The FBI agents were asked to draw up the federal complaint based on evidence collected by the NYPD detectives working on the state charges and police in Pennsylvania who arrested Mangione. So you've got multiple state and local agencies working to provide information for the FBI that would be used in filing the federal charges. The federal prosecutors say that they have jurisdiction in the case because Mangione's travel in interstate commerce, he took a bus from Atlanta to New York prior to the killing. He then used the interstate facilities using a cell phone and the internet to plan and carry out the stalking, shooting, and killing of Thompson in Manhattan. One other thing to look at this is that spiral notebook that Mangione had when he was caught. And when they took a look at this, and it really did bring out something. The writing in the notebook helped investigators build the federal case against him. It ended up being a well-planned homicide involving stalking the movements of his alleged victim. There was an entry in the spiral notebook dated August 15th that reads, quote, "The details are finally coming together," unquote. Now, according to the federal complaint, it also says, "I'm glad in a way that I've procrastinated." Mangione allegedly wrote in this notebook, that it gave him time to learn more about the company he was targeting. And then they redacted the name of the company. Could it have been a company other than the one that Brian Thompson was the CEO? I don't know. But the notebook actually says this: the target is insurance because it checks every box. The notebook also contains several handwritten pages that express hostility toward the health insurance industry and wealthy executives in particular. You want to know where's the beef? Maybe there's the beef.
I don't know. I mean, why Brian Thompson? Was he an easy target? Was he somebody that had singled out? Did he read something in the news? You talked about the stock thing and all sorts of things. And I don't even know if that was necessarily broadly known. And I think the other thing that's really kind of fascinating about this, they've talked about how information was contained in there in the manifesto, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, where he said he did not want to use a bomb because he didn't want to harm innocents. Dave, I'm really wondering, and I hope that they do this, were there other people on the list? Was Brian Thompson just the easiest person to get to?
Joe, we have danced around the manifesto, but we've got one here that, based on everything we've seen thus far, this is it. So here is the manifesto, okay? To the best of our ability to confirm, this is it. This is what it says. Quote, "To the feds, I'll keep this short because I do respect what you do for our country. To save you a lengthy investigation, I state plainly that I wasn't working with anyone. This was fairly trivial. Some elementary social engineering, basic CAD, a lot of patience. The spiral notebook, if present, has some straggling notes and to-do lists that illuminate the gist of it. My tech is pretty locked down because I work in engineering, so probably not much info there. I do apologize for any strife of traumas, but it had to be done. United is the indecipherable largest company in the U.S. by market cap, behind only Apple, Google, Walmart. It has grown and grown, but has our life expectancy? No. The reality is these indecipherable have simply gotten too powerful, and they continue to abuse our country for immense profit because the American public has allowed them to get away with it. Obviously, the problem is more complex, but I do not have space, and frankly, I do not pretend to be the most qualified person to lay out the full argument. But many have illuminated the corruption and greed, e.g. Rosenthal, Moore, decades ago, and the problem simply remain. It is not an issue of awareness at this point, but clearly power games at play. Evidently, I am the first to face it with such brutal honesty. Unquote. That is the manifesto.
One of the other things that I've heard is that a lot of these people that occupy these spaces now at other healthcare companies have scrubbed their biographical information now. They've completely come down. Their LinkedIn stuff is not available, and I guarantee you the security apparatus that surrounds these individuals has been kicked up. I'm still to this, I see these movie stars that are on television and listen, or that are walking the carpet and all this stuff. And they've got these huge, they look like they're probably former special operations people, with dark sunglasses and, all beefed up and everything. And listen, I'm not trying to degrade these individuals as human beings, but from a value standpoint and what type of anger people might have directed at these individuals, maybe because of some kind of tweet that they made or something, that's nothing compared to the anger that people have directed at people in the healthcare industry, in the health insurance industry, because you've got people out there that have sustained pain and it's long going and they've had to mortgage their homes and all these sorts of things. And I'm really thinking, why didn't this guy have a security detail? At least one guy with him. Why was there not somebody walking on his shoulder, as he is, going down the street? Why had the street not been checked out? Why hadn't the door been checked out? Because that's a common thing, protecting a principal as they're walking along. I'm really wondering about that. I'd done some digging, and the person that's in charge of the security internationally for United Healthcare was hired back in 2023. And I'm sure that there have probably been a myriad of questions that have been asked of that individual. But here's the story. Moving forward, my partner Dave and I have spent, the past week, probably now, many hours covering this case. Dave has done all of this hard work for Nancy Grace. I've covered it on multiple other platforms. This is not the end of the story. This is only the beginning, and I urge each and every one of you to keep your eye on the news, because there's already been another threat and another arrest made in regards to someone that has threatened somebody else in the healthcare industry. I pray that we're not going to see any copycats out there. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.